Today we're talking with Dick Doyle at the Ripcord reunion in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the interviewer is Michael McGregor with the Grand Valley State University's Veterans Oral History Project. Dick, to get started, when and where were you born?
I was born in Bells Falls, Vermont in September 6, 1945.
Okay, and did you grow up in Vermont?
I grew up in Vermont and still live there. Yep.
Okay. Tell me about growing up in Vermont. Was it a big town, little town?
I grew up in a small, relatively small town of 3,500. It's a village within the town of Rockingham. Bells Falls is a village. I went to Bells Falls High School and spent my formative years there. It was kind of, interesting. Everybody was safe back in those days, and you could run down the street with your dogs, and everybody knew everybody. Went to a Catholic grade school with Catholic nuns, so they shaped me pretty good. And graduated from Bells Falls High School in 1963, and went to a prep school, which was nearby, for a year, and then I went to the University of Vermont for 4.5 years, graduating from there in May of 1969.
You graduated in May of 19. What was your major?
I was a history major.
Oh,
so interesting. I was a history major when there was a lot of history going on around us, swirling around us, I probably should say, at the time. I was in college.
What did your folks do when you were growing up?
My mom was a hairdresser, and my dad worked he worked 20 years on the railroad, and then a lot of railroad jobs disappeared. So later in his second career in his life was in a machine shop in a town just about 15 miles from me, Springfield, Vermont. Major machine tool manufacturer. For small Vermont towns, they had 3 employers there that employed more than 1,000 people each.
Wow.
So it was big. It was big. The biggest employers in where I lived. So that's where he went to work.
Okay, so you got out of college in '69.
Yep.
And then what happened?
Well, actually, when my degree was officially awarded to me, I was in basic training.
Oh, okay.
I had been drafted. I actually finished all my degree requirements in December of '68, and in January or February, I can't remember which, I got my draft notice, and so I was drafted in May 7th of 1969.
And where did you do your basic at?
Went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for my basic training, and that was pretty interesting.
How so?
Well, I was a college graduate, so and with my naivete, I thought that, well, geez, the Army's not going to waste my talents on something as unrealistic as the infantry, but little did I know that would come later. But about halfway through my basic training cycle, all of a sudden I had this epiphany. We were at the range, and they had all these guys there that had these like bandoliers, machine guns, and they had these bandoliers of ammo and stuff. And I go to a couple of them and said, what are you doing that for? Aren't you gonna get the real thing soon enough? For because that's what was on everybody's mind. Little did I know, I was in a company of about 90% of the company were National Guardsmen, and they were there training for their basic training. And then when they finished their basic training, they were going home, back to high school, and I wasn't going to go home. So that kind of opened my eyes right about then. Like, uh-oh. Things don't look very good for me, because if they're all National Guard and they need troops, then they're probably going to grab me. So they did. I was assigned, got my orders for advanced infantry training.
And your AIT
I went to Fort Lewis, Washington.
At Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis had infantry training at that time.
At any time, with the degree, at any time during basic, did they talk to you about OCS?
Yes,
or
they did.
anything?
Yeah, actually, after all my testing and that I went through and stuff, they brought me in to interview me, and they said, we can offer you a couple of options. One would be you actually scored well enough, you could go to language school in Monterey, California. I said, oh, that sounds pretty appealing. Or you could go to OCS. And I said, well, what's that? They said, well, you go and I don't know how many weeks or months it was, and then you serve a 2-year hitch. Well, I was approaching my 24th birthday when I was drafted. So I said, no, thank you. I want 730 days and out.
You had them all counted.
I had them all counted. I had them all counted. So whatever they offered me, if it took more than 730 days, I wasn't interested, because I figured that I did that late in life, and I just didn't want to stretch it out any longer. Lo and behold, I spent 30 years in it. So.
Yeah. Those 700 and some days really stretched out for you, didn't they?
Yeah.
Okay, did you have leave after basic, or did you report right over to?
I went directly from basic training to advanced infantry training at Fort Lewis.
Okay, and that lasted?
That was 8 or 9 weeks. At that time, things were, the news was looking good, like maybe they'd start winding down the war, so everybody was thinking, well, maybe this won't happen, but lo and behold, it certainly did.
Now, your AIT infantry training, what was stressed? What did you do?
We ran a lot more than we did in basic, which is hard to believe. It's funny, they would teach squad tactics. They did the probing for booby traps and stuff like that, but they did a lot of conventional stuff like nuclear blasts and all that crazy kind of stuff. Did a lot of field problems, a lot more field problems than we did in basic training. But they worked you a lot harder, and they also were a lot more lenient on you than they were in basic training, which is to be expected, I guess.
Did they also train you in crew-served weapons, or?
Yep, I think we fired a TOW, we fired laws, we fired I guess I would call it a bazooka. Also, I was a M1 in basic training, and then when we got to advanced infantry training, we switched over to the M16. So that was a major switch.
You still had the old M1 Garand and
we had the M1,
basic training?
We had the M1s in Fort Dix, New Jersey. Yep.
Wow. Yeah.
Yep. We were really behind the times. I don't know if they were just not well equipped enough or what, but so had to learn to shoot all over again. Once we.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I know the Marines would give their guys M1s
Yeah.
a lot of times in basic training, but I went through basic in '66, and we had the M14.
Yeah.
And it went from there. But
Yeah.
that's interesting. So okay, you got out of AIT.
Yeah.
Were you ordered to Vietnam right away? Or?
Yes. Yeah. I had orders to Vietnam, and I got a 2-week leave to be able to go back to Vermont. But the government, I would always marvel at the government and how they manage to stick it to you sometimes. My advanced infantry training was at Fort Lewis, Washington, and my shipping point to Vietnam was Fort Lewis, Washington. So when it came time for my leave, I had to fly home to Vermont and back to Fort Lewis on my own money.
On your own, yeah.
Yeah, because of the way the orders were set
that's
up.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my duty station and my shipping station.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't prepared for that when you're making $93 a month. So it just added to my anger of the whole process, I guess.
Now, when you're going through AIT, did you also have the reservists, several reservists and National Guard?
No, at that time they were all people. Matter of fact, there were some guys from my basic training company that I had met switched over into AIT with us. So they're, at that time they were all either RA or draftees. Most of us were draftees.
Did most of your AIT class get orders to Vietnam, or were some of the guys
A very small number got orders to Germany.
Okay.
Very small number, but the majority, the bulk of them got orders to Vietnam.
And once you were ordered for Vietnam, did they have any special orientation or training for you before you left Fort Lewis to go home, or?
No, I tried to volunteer for NCO school, but it kind of backfired on me.
How's that?
Well, it's my own fault. Before I even got drafted in the Army, a friend of mine had preceded me into the military, a college buddy of mine. And when he came home, he said, "Dick, when you first go into basic training, and there's a week where they'll test you all up and down and sideways." He said, "Whenever there's questions about would you like to be outdoors, building a campfire, or what would you rather be sitting in a symphony hall, listening to music, anything that's got the outdoors or any of that kind of activity, I always say no. Lie to them and just say no." So I did. So I had my infantry score was like a 76. My intelligence score, that GT score, I don't know if you're familiar with the term. My GT score was 149, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But my infantry score was 76. So when I was in advanced infantry training, about halfway through the cycle, 4 or 5 weeks in, the drill sergeant came out to the podium one day and said, "The following people need to report to the company headquarters because we want to interview you for NCO school," and they rattled off a whole bunch of names. So I always was the kind of person that felt I needed to make your own breaks, especially when you've been drafted. So they didn't call my name. So I went to the company area and I said, "Look, I'm in advanced infantry training. I have a college degree, and I'd like to volunteer for NCO school." They said, "Well, okay, so let me check." So they got back to me a couple of days later and they said, "You can't volunteer." I said, "What do you mean?" "So your infantry score is too low."
Okay.
It had to be a 90.
Alrighty.
Here I am in advanced, you get the irony of the picture?
Right.
I'm in advanced infantry training, and I'm not equipped to go to NCO school because I don't have a right number.
Yeah.
Just added to it was starting to add up this pile of things about the Army that weren't sitting too well with me.
You were saying, okay. So did you know what unit you were going to go to out of AIT when you got your orders for Vietnam, or?
No, didn't have a clue, just that you're going to report back to Fort Lewis on such and such a day. And then the drill was, once you got there, you fell out in formation 3, 4, 5 times a day, and then they'd call off names of people who were ready to go that had been processed in wherever they were. Like, I think, eventually you got the orders to send you directly to Vietnam. That's probably only in Fort Lewis, maybe 4 or 5 days before.
This is after your leave.
This
right?
is after my leave, after I come back. Yeah.
Okay, so you fly. I assume you flew over to
Flew
Vietnam.
from SeaTac in Seattle to Alaska to Japan to Vietnam. Came into Long Binh.
You came into Long Binh, and then you. What was your first impression of the country?
Oh my God! Of course, Fort Dix was what you thought was warm, but not really warm. And Seattle was actually a very moderate climate. And I was in May, June, July, and August. I was in training. So summer months in New England and summer months in Seattle were pretty mild. So when I got to Vietnam and got out of the plane and just the heat. Torrent of heat just knocked you over, and you just say, "Oh my God, it is as hot as they said it was." Of course, you're on the tarmac, and it's just sucking all that heat up and hanging right onto it. But, be in infantry, they immediately assigned me to like guard duty on the perimeter there at Long Bend.
At the replacement company?
Yeah,
You got over
yeah.
there?
While I was waiting for orders, so I think I spent 6 or 7 days there, and they send you out on guard duty every night, and you come back, and during the day they kind of left you alone during the day because you had to pull half a shift
Right.
with other guys.
How would they notify you then how did they notify you?
Again, there would be
you were-
formations.
So you still have to make the formation even though you were
Yeah,
guard
I had to
night?
make formations, and then they would call out where you were going to go eventually. And then, so that was like, everybody's like, oh man, they figured that was like the rolling of the dice, like, oh, maybe I'll get something good, maybe I won't get something good, So I got chosen to go to the 1st Infantry Division, which was at that time they were operating out of Xi'an and Lai Khe and Dao Tiang, the Parrots Beak area in 3 Corps. So I flew into C-130 into Dao Tiang, which was headquarters where they processed us, and then from there I think at that time they had the unit. They had the unit that you're going to belong to at that time.
Did they have any?
No, I take that back. No, I'll take that back.
Before you joined your unit, did they have any orientation or like jungle school or anything for you?
Well, actually, I went to Xi'an. I went from Long Bend to Xi'an. No, I'm not in Dao Tiang yet. And there was some training then. They took you out on some patrols. I shot expert with the M16 when I was in advanced infantry training. So they said, how would you like to get 3 or 4 days of sniper training? And I said, oh yeah, I'd like that. So went to about a 4-day sniper school at Xi'an.
What did that involve?
M14, whatever you call it, a match type M14 with, you learn how to zero it in at a longer range than you would, you had to zero it in at, I don't know, it's 30 yards or whatever, but then you would start learning how to shoot at, much longer distances than you shot in the AIT. And then after you got some proficiency with that, then they brought in a scope, and then they added that element to it. I didn't end up being very good at it, so which is too bad, because I was thinking, well, maybe if I could be that, because sniper duty was pretty good duty, which I would find out later on when I was guarding snipers in the rice paddies.
Yeah.
So
you didn't, did you wash out of the sniper school?
Kind of,
or
yeah.
Didn't have the score to go on?
Didn't have the score to go on.
What was the farthest distance you were shooting there?
Oh, 800, 1,000.
Meters?
Yeah, meters with a scope. And
With the M14?
Yeah, with the M14, which is a match type.
Yeah. Would you shoot
Special.
match grade ammo too?
Yeah.
Was it special loads for you guys?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So that was interesting.
Okay.
And then also, then I had a narrow escape there. When I was in Xi'an and they were processing us, because there's a lot of people for the next level, the next unit. One day they said, "Oh, you're a college graduate, right? Yep. Can you type?" Said, "Not really. I can hunt and peck." And they said, "Well, come back this afternoon, and we'll give you a typing test, because maybe we have a job for you, clerical job." So I went back and I typed 9 words a minute.
Oh, didn't get to clerk.
The guy and the guy that got the job typed 15 words a minute.
Okay.
So I said, "Oh, here I am. Already, I thought I was going to escape the noose, and it's not going to happen for me. Fate is just not holding up very well for me."
So then what unit were you then assigned to?
Then I was assigned to the 2nd of the 28th Infantry, the Black Lions of the 1st Infantry Division. It was Bravo Company of the 2nd of the 28th.
Okay.
And they were operating out of Dao Tiang, so the C-130 beat to Dao Tiang, and went to the company area.
When you joined the company, how were you received when you joined the company?
Well, I came in and the company was in the field, so I met with the first sergeant was the first guy I saw. So he says, you know, take all this stuff and take all your underwear and throw it away. You're not going to use any of that stuff. And then take all your new BDUs that you have, and jungle fatigues, and you just put them in to the rotation. They said, well, you're just going to wear what you have now, and then we'll, you know, your new stuff will be fodder for everybody else
Right.
to use. So you never saw your stuff after that, basically. So they flew me out, and they were in this little, tiny. It wasn't really a fire. It was a fire base, but it was a mortar pit fire base.
Okay.
Very small, level ground, no elevation.
Just have 81s there, or did they have some 4 deuces? Or?
Just 81s. Yeah, a couple of mortar pits, and it was very small. There was sandbag bunkers that we operated out, and concertina wire around the perimeter. And outside of the perimeter, an LZ for choppers, because that's when you get ready to go out.
Was a company-based?
Company base,
size
yeah,
fire base?
company size fire base. Later on there were other bigger ones where you went in and there was maybe a battalion size fire base, much bigger, but basically the same concept, only a lot more elaborate defense systems. And there was a Ville, like you could actually see part of the Ville from where you were standing from the fencing.
So, what was the company's mission there? Obviously to secure the fire base, but
Yeah, secure the fire base. A lot of it was flat terrain, very flat terrain there. Roads, so we would do a lot of mine sweep activity. The roads had to be swept every day, and mostly at that point. By that point in time, the 1st Infantry was operating mostly against VC. Most of the NVA had been wiped out at that point in time. Not completely, but most of the NVA presence was pretty slim, mostly VC activity. A lot of times you just go out and you set up in a blocking force, and then another unit will be sweeping through the areas that we operated in. Trying to flush, like the deer hunter deal,
Right.
flushing out
Right.
out the quarry.
Drive the game, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of blocking force missions, or then other missions where you were the sweeper. The terrain was canopy jungle with a lot of it destroyed by roam plows,
Right.
where everything was just flattened out. So, but the terrain was very uneven because you had stumps and trees. So there was a lot of places where VC could hide, or a lot of places where booby traps could be set up. So even though it was flat land, it was often difficult traversing from one point to another.
In your your mine clearing road sweeps, would you encounter many mines, or?
The roads that I swept on were mostly very hard packed, and in the time I was there, they never uncovered them.
Now, would you do the actual sweeping, or security engineers who were doing?
No, the actual grunts would do the sweeping.
Okay.
Yeah. Flank security, front security, rear security, and then sweepers would just go down the road.
And in this devastated terrain, did you encounter many booby traps as you were?
Yes.
Sweeping?
Yeah, we had several close calls with booby traps. Actually walking over them, and then you're like past it, and somebody brings the company to a halt. You look, and there's a booby trap in a tree that's aimed down, and trip wires down. So yeah, there was some. We had 2 hoys with us, who were really pretty talented at identifying those, and spotting them, and looking for tracks and trails and stuff like that. Another one of our duties was we're operating near Vils, and we operated near this. I think the Saigon. Our AO ended up near the Saigon River, and the 25th Infantry was on the other side of the river. And during the rice harvest, I was there during one rice harvest. We would set up the Vils so that the VC couldn't come in and steal rice and so forth. And I'm talking about the sniper. What they would do is the terrain was relatively flat, and they would, in the middle of a rice paddy, they would drop up, what do you want to call it? A tower, wooden tower that they put a sniper up on top,
Oh, okay.
and then we pulled security for the sniper down, laying in the rice paddies. So he got the good stuff up, and
The tower was kind of obvious, though, wasn't it?
Very
I mean,
obvious.
to the would the sniper get many shots, or
the limited time I was there, he didn't have any opportunity,
Okay.
but I thought the guy was a sitting duck for mortars myself.
yeah. Well, or just obvious. 'Cause
Yeah.
at this time, you're there after Tet 68, when the BC,
Yeah.
were really decimated.
Yeah, very decimated, yeah.
As well. So,
Yeah.
what kind of contact would you be having? Just occasional sniper fire?
Occasional
or,
sniper fire, or we'd be walking through the roam pound, spot a VC popping up out of a hole or something, and we'd just surround them, and bunkers. In the triple canopy that wasn't all knocked down, we would find bunkers, usually some fresh ones, some old ones. Actually, that's where I saw my first American soldier, GI, that was killed.
Oh, really?
Was down there, and when and the story revolved around a bunker. I don't know if you want me to tell that or not.
Sure. Yeah, if you're comfortable telling it,
Yeah.
sure. I'd love to hear it.
This was in January. I probably went out in the bush, October, probably early November. So this would be in January. Actually it was January 22nd, 1970 to be exact. And we were just moving from point A to point B, whatever our mission was, and somebody came up to our company commander, not company commander, platoon leader, and said, we think we found something. So he made everybody stop, and he wanted to be John Wayne. He was desperate to be John Wayne, and things were pretty quiet then, and he just couldn't wait for some action to happen. So him and the RTO, his name was David Farr, and it's a job that I had like 10 days before that. The platoon leader switched RTOs. I was his RTO, and then a new guy came into the unit, and he gave him the job. Him and I didn't hit it off that well.
So you and the platoon leader?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he went off to check out what was going on, and then pretty short order we heard this massive explosion. So I had a radio then. I was still an RTO, but I wasn't the platoon leader's RTO then. I was the squad leader's RTO. So couldn't get him on the radio. Couldn't find out what was going on. So we took off on a dead run and through the jungle and came into an opening, and there was a two NVA bunkers there. VC bunkers there. And what had happened is the platoon leader, in his, you don't mind if I use the word arrogance?
No, good.
In his arrogance, decided to check the bunker out, and he went down in the bunker, and halfway down the steps in the bunker was a booby trap. So he detonated the booby trap, and it blew him into the bunker, the bottom of the bunker. And the RTO, his RTO was standing at the top of the steps. It killed him instantly and blew him backwards and down, and he flipped over. So when I got to the scene and the medic got to the scene, the first one we saw was the RTO, and he was on his, he was face down in the dirt. And I turned him over and instantly knew that he was dead. It's that.
Yeah, sure he took the full force.
He took the
front
full
before he
force,
did
the major force of the explosion came at him. And the medic knelt down and checked his pulse and looked at his eyes and checked, he said he's gone. So I still have that face in my mind all the time. And it was my job up until 10 days before that. That was the other.
You were his RTO, right?
I was the RTO. The platoon leader, he was a big man. He was a football player. He was a ROTC guy. It blew him into the bottom of the bunker. But he lived. But he was unconscious, and he was dead weight. And he was probably 230 pounds. Well, at that time, I weighed 150. And it took us a lot of work plus he was severely wounded. His whole back
I was
was
going to say, he probably took the full force of the blast to the back, right?
shrapnel.
Yeah.
His back was just when you could just see the holes, the shrapnel going. And we got him out, and someone had called for medevac, and there was also the platoon sergeant who had gone around the side of the bunker when the platoon leader was going down into it. He caught some shrapnel in his chest, but he only got he was able to stick around. He was able to get up and move around.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a medevac in there, and we had to make stretchers took our shirts off and poles, and just buttoned our shirts together, makeshift stretchers. And then where the area where it wasn't really an LZ, but where the medical chopper was going to come down was actually in the high grass and brush and everything, so we had to climb over brush and stuff. It was pretty stressful getting them to the medevac. So that was my first experience with seeing.
Did he ever rejoin the unit, or that you know of?
And the platoon sergeant or the lieutenant? No, neither one.
Okay.
Neither one. They were apparently wounded severely enough, so they went home. The platoon sergeant, I knew his name at one time. I can't recall it at the moment, but I could never, ever recall the name of the platoon leader. And I wish I could, because I wanted to hear his story.
Yeah.
What prompted him to do that?
Yeah.
So, okay, this was about 3 months into your tour
Yeah.
with the First
Yeah.
Infantry Division.
Yeah.
What was the, now, was the division getting ready to rotate back to the States?
Yes,
or at
yeah.
that time?
I had been through, yeah. I think in, the Nixon had already talked about the drawdown was going to begin, and one of the ways they were going to do that is they're going to pull, whole units out of Vietnam. What they didn't tell people was they were just going to take most of those people, and transfer them somewhere else. But, I think in late January, they said you're going to go to a mechanized infantry unit with the 1st Infantry. Okay, so this was the beginning of part of what I would call my withdrawal. One of the only things you have going for you as an infantry soldier in a war that you don't want to be in the first place, because the president has already said we're gonna leave. So my mindset was that every person they lost from the time the president said we were going to leave was a wasted life. That was just the way I felt about it. So the only thing you do have going for you is your buddies.
Mm-hmm.
You're fighting for, that's what you do your job because you want to protect your buddies, and your buddies want to protect you. So when I and many others were told that we're going to disband your unit and you're going to go somewhere else, the process for me, the mental process for me of disengaging from trusting began, because I was going to be on my own again and have to leave all my buddies and start with a whole new.
You formed
Yeah.
some friendships?
Some really significant friendships with the 2nd and the 28th, and met some really good guys, and they had their shit together, and they were good, and felt comfortable with them, and all that sort of thing. So, I should probably go back, and this was in December. They brought us. They actually brought us into the Michelin rubber plantation. We actually drove through there in trucks, and they brought us to a big clearing, and had I think it was near Christmas, so they had a big party out in the field with lots of good food, and so forth and so on. And they had beer. They had too much beer. He gave everybody 3 beers, but some guys didn't drink, so other guys hogged it. And when we finished the day, said, okay, saddle up, you're going back, guys are going back in the field, and we want you to go here. So we went into the jungle near the plantation and found a bunker complex that was probably 6 or 7 bunkers, and it was so fresh that you could actually smell the food, and you could smell the recently departed VC. I think they were VC rather than NBA. They might have been NBA. So we pulled into this complex with all these bunkers, and what you do when you pull into an area that you're not familiar with is you send sweeps out around. So I drew, I think, 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So I had myself and 2 other guys. We had to go out. They wanted us to go out 100 meters and then sweep down to 3 o'clock and come back in at 3 o'clock. And then they sent others out. So, well, we got out to 12 o'clock and we started sweeping down to 3, and then There was jungle, and then there was a clearing, and then there was jungle. So we had to cross a clearing to get to where we needed to go. So we got in the middle of the clearing, and all of a sudden machine gun fire just ripped open. We thought we were dead. We thought it was machine gun fire at us, but it was actually machine gun fire from our troops at 9 o'clock, the other side of the perimeter, on the VC or the NVA that didn't know we were in their bunker complex, and they were coming back in from probably somewhere where they'd been. So it was firing at these guys going away, but we thought we were dead for
That's one
about
of those
a couple
moments.
seconds, old moments that we just dropped like a rock. So that happened in December, but and a few other things like that. But those they weren't nearly as dramatic as this stuff happened when we got up to 101st.
Right. As you're drawing down, did they tell you that you were going to be going to other units, or how?
No communication. They said, when they said, well, now you're going to be in the second of the second infantry, which is a mechanized infantry, which I hated with a passion.
So prior to this, were you operating with any mechanized units before that, or just pretty much on?
A little bit of that, and we also did some river duty when I was still with the 2nd and 28th. Which was, to me, sit and duck duty. It's a boat with a 60 mounted on it, and two big long. Probably is, half the boat's probably from here to there in length. It'll fit basically a squad. We'd ride up and down the river and river banks. We're talking about. People thought that was good duty because you could swim and you didn't have to hump as much, but I thought it was horrible duty.
Well, now on the riverbanks, was there a lot of foliage, or did they use a lot of Agent Orange on the?
Most of the riverbanks were very thick foliage right at the edge of the river, and then beyond that would be the rice paddies and stuff.
Okay.
So there was a swath between the end of where the river ended and the thing where it was heavily you could conceal.
Okay, because I know the Navy, they sprayed a lot of Agent Orange around riverbanks, but I just didn't know if that was up that way or not.
Matter of fact, when we would stop at night, we would take half of the squad out onto that fringe area and man up kind of a crummy looking perimeter, because half of them would be in the boat and half of them would be on the land. That was your setup for the night.
Did you have any significant contact when you were in the boat, or?
No, but shortly after we did I think we ran that for a couple of weeks, and shortly after we finished up our assignment, word came down that because they always met at the same point, the RBG, the bejesus out of the unit that replaced us.
Okay. So units would rotate
units
onto
would.
that duty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you only had it for a couple of weeks total.
So then, end of January, first part of February?
Yeah, went into mechanized infantry.
Second
and second mechanized infantry. Again, you're on the new guy, even though you weren't the new guy. But they treated. I was very disappointed in how the guys that came with me from a regular leg unit to how we were treated. They treated us like we were cherries, and
really?
just come into the country.
How many of you guys were transferred? Now they disbanded your.
Disbanded the entire 2nd and 28th, which is
disbanded the whole battalion, and then allocated you out
to different
other units.
Yeah.
How many went with you to the 2nd and 2nd?
I probably knew 3 or 4 guys.
Okay.
Added to that particular company that I went. I forget what. I don't know if it was Alpha or Bravo company.
So you went there
Yeah.
and they
Um,
treated you as
treat us poorly.
newcomers.
Yeah. One of the things they did with a mechanized unit is when they get set up for the night, they would send a LP out like 100 meters, way out, not like you would in a leg unit.
Mm-hmm.
They'd send 100 meters with a radio. And they'd always pick us to go out on the
Oh, yeah?
LPs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Did operate where one of our armored personnel carriers, not tanks. One blew up one time and the tread came off and we all went flying through the air and the driver shattered his leg. Probably had my most, for sure had my most hilarious moment ever in Vietnam when I was with the mechanized infantry. You didn't take the trails too often, so you literally, even with an armored personnel carrier, you literally smash down the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
and they took turns having who would be the lead track, because there was a lot of wear and tear on
Right.
the APCs. So one day we were the lead track, and we were just basically smashing down jungle, and we were smashing, and we hit a tree that was filled with thousands and thousands of red ants, and they just dropped on us and nearly blanketed us with red ants. And you never seen guys jump off an armored personnel carrier and get naked, stripped down to nothing in a faster possible time than what we did. It was horrendous, because you threw off all your clothing. You didn't care what was happening around you. I mean, your defense mechanism was totally shot.
Exactly, yeah.
And everybody got off, and they started swatting ants off of each other and everything, and then all of a sudden everybody just broke out, and it was like hilarious. This is just too comic to possibly even believe that this could happen to us. That was without a doubt my most hilarious moment.
You never rode inside though, did you?
No,
Always up
up on
outside,
top.
Yeah. And on top, did they have, what kind of arms would they have?
50 cal on top, and 50 cal gunner, and then of course they always made you wear your flak jackets because you're so vulnerable to RPGs. Other leg units, they didn't make you wear flak jackets that much, except when you're on guard duty at night, stuff like that.
So you were at this second,
Yep.
or now that's another first ID unit.
First
correct?
infantry.
Yeah.
Yep. And then
How long were you with them?
about a month.
Okay.
About a month. And then I would call it a tragedy occurred. We were going to turn over, we were going to go from Like to Zion. Zion was the headquarters of the 1st Infantry Division. But in the interim, on our way into Zion, we were going to turn over all of our ammo, all of our equipment that we used to Arvins. So they pulled our entire company into this big, huge clearing field, and I don't know how many tracks there were. It seemed like there was at least a dozen, maybe 20 trucks, armored personnel carriers. That seems like a lot, though, doesn't it?
Well, they said you had
Yeah.
how many in a platoon? You
Yeah.
had what, three in a platoon maybe?
So we all pulled up in, got in a formation like you would with, look out to the,
Mm-hmm.
and basically unloaded everything we had, ammunition, because we were going from there directly into Zion to begin the process of wrapping up. So we made this humongous pile of ammunition and flares and grenades and 50 ammo and everything you could possibly think of, all that the Arvins were going to come in and get. And these two bonehead, I call them boneheads, they're fooling around with smoke grenades.
Okay.
And they popped a smoke grenade and it caught on fire and caught them. It was tall, very tall grass where we had everything. So it started catching the ammo on fire.
Oh my goodness.
So in pretty short order, most people are ducking down behind their armored personnel carriers because there's ammo starting to
It's
cook
all
off,
cooking
cooking
off,
off. So the poor guy, the company commander, I could just see what was going through his mind as he didn't want his career ruined based on something like this happening. So he ran up to the exploding ordnance with a fire extinguisher and tried to put the fire out. And round went off and caught him in the abdomen just below his flak jacket. And they came in, he medevaced him out, and we thought he was going to be fine. And ended up, when we got into Zion later that evening, he died.
Oh my
And
goodness.
they said it was because of he had a reaction to the anesthesia.
Oh, okay.
Not the wound itself, but the anesthesia. So, I mean, how foolish is that?
Yeah.
How foolish is
One
that?
starting the fire, and then
Yeah.
two thinking he could stop it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can understand that he just didn't want to have to answer questions on what happened, so he figured
So the Arvins, then the Arvins just got the tracks, right?
yeah, because all the stuff was
Yeah.
essentially all, we couldn't leave for a couple of hours. We had to stay there a couple of hours until everything kind of died down, and then we jumped in our tracks and headed into Zion.
Well, did you give the tracks to the Arvins eventually then, or no?
Those were going to be turned over. Those were our transportation from that point into
I got
Zion.
you.
Yeah,
Okay. And then once you got in,
yeah.
now you know that unit, second of the
Yeah,
second is no more. So
Yeah,
what happened?
and again, kind of, I just, this, in my mind, this process of me withdrawing into my shell was further, what's the word I want to use?
Reinforced.
Reinforced,
probably, right.
further reinforced, because here was going to happen all over again. I was going to lose all the guys that I knew, and so Dick, you can only count on yourself. You just can't count on anybody else. And a lot of the guys were, and again, they had a big awards ceremony and all this stuff. So all us new guys got nothing, and all the guys that had been in the second probably for months longer than us, got this and that and all this. So again, there were hard feelings. But by that point in time, my Army career is, this is the way things operate.
Well, now were a lot of these second guys, were they going to be going home too, or were they going to?
No, they were going to be like me. They
renditioned into
were going to do
other,
the same rendition. They were going to be
groups,
going to go somewhere to the 1st Cav or the 101st or the AmeriCal or whoever.
Do you know if there was a service?
There was a cutoff
in
date.
Countries, like if you had more than 9 months, they wouldn't send you? Or
Yeah, there was a
something?
cutoff date. I don't know what that
Okay.
magic cutoff date was. So by now I've approached about my 6-month mark in Vietnam.
6 months, and you served in 2 different units.
Served in 2 different
And now
units.
you're ready to go to a third.
And we got to I don't know if that was back to Long. I'm not sure where we went. We left Zion and went to wherever it was. Got orders to 101st. Meantime, there's a guy who kind of went through all of this with me. His name is Greg Phillips, and he's here. He's here today.
Okay.
He's here for the Ripcord reunion. So we're kind of. We did have that. I did have a little bit of mutual support. He was one of them.
So was he in the 2nd of 2nd with you?
as well.
And
Yep, and the 2nd of the 28th.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you both transitioned together then.
Yep, so we kind of were facing the same, you know, here we go, uncertainty and change. So now I'm going from 3 Corps to I Corps.
How
And,
many of you? How many went on your orders then?
I would say, and of course then you're all scattered. That's
Right.
the other thing, you don't know what's happening to the other guy. I would say when we went up to the 101st, there was probably about maybe 8 or 10 of us.
Okay.
Guys that I didn't know, but I did know Greg. There was guys that I didn't know that had come from the 1st Infantry.
So what was your reaction to saying, "Oh my goodness, now I got the
Oh,
101st"?
Oh yeah, it's like, oh, we heard bad things about the 101st at that point. Now we're talking February, late February, early March of 1970.
Of 70, right?
70, yeah. So when we came into Fubai, and they treated us extremely well. They was, oh, we're really glad to have, you know, when they got us in a briefing, and they said, we're really glad to have you folks from the 1st Infantry and from where there was a couple other units that were rolling up at the same time. You know, we're glad to have you, and so forth and so on. So they treated us really good.
So the reaction was basically the opposite of that you had at the 2nd of 2nd.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely, exactly. So that, you know, boded well to begin with. So then, so we went from Fubai to Camp Evans. And at Camp Evans, then we went through search training. I think that was maybe about a week, where they talked about booby traps, and they talked about, you know, NVA. And now they're talking about NVA all the time. Nobody was talking about any VC anymore up there. All NVA and, you know, satchel charges and all that sort of thing, and larger scale tactics. Took you out on some patrols to kind of refresh you, gave you repelling. They had a repelling tower there, so a little bit of that. Took you out for fire. They had like this new quick thing they wanted you to learn how to fire your weapon quickly, just on reaction. They called it a quick fire or something like that.
So even now here you're seasoned infantryman
Yep.
who've already had 6 months in the field
Yep.
in the bush.
You're going through the same
And
thing.
You're
Guy.
going through your search training.
Yep,
there too.
same
So
thing.
that
A
was-
guy that just was as it was his first assignment, which is fine, you know.
Yeah. Now
Does
being
it-
seasoned, did that give you? Did you have a little different perspective on what they were
Oh God,
doing?
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. In for sure, because like they would say, now, because a lot of the audience was new, and some of us had been around the block a few times. They said, now, who do you think's got quicker reactions, a seasoned infantry veteran or the new guy? You know, in terms of guys, the new guys, the seasoned guy's gonna have much better reaction. Nope, you're gonna move just as fast as those guys do when it starts to happen. So don't worry about it. They wanted to put people at ease, you know, a little bit. So we got sent to Delta Company, and again the company was in the field and only met with the first sergeant. So they gave you all your gear, and you're wrecked up, and they said you'll be flying out with the company in the next couple days. So put us on a chopper. I think Greg was on the same chopper with me at that. He was the 1st Infantry guy. Get out into they were in the probably 1st or 2nd. They were deep. They were up on top of the mountains at that point. This is March. It'd be March of 1970 at this point. Get off the chopper just before dusk, and they sent a guy up to the LZ to guide us. Of course, the company was set up a little bit of ways away from the LZ, which wouldn't only made sense. So we jumped out, it was two of us, I know, jumped off, and probably more, but we jumped off the chopper, and the first guy says, "How many days you got in country?" And I said, 180 something. He goes, "Jesus Christ, you got more than I have." So that was the first question they asked, "How many days you got in country?" So,
Did it turn out that they were really glad to have
Yeah.
seasoned guys
yeah,
coming in?
yeah, somebody that had been,
Yeah.
a grunt already
Yeah.
and was seasoned and knew the drill, you know, all the things you needed to know to keep yourself as quiet as you possibly could, and safe as you possibly could, given the circumstances.
Now, prior to going to the 101st, when you were at the 2nd of the 28th, did you combat assault much out of helicopters, or was this going to be a kind of a new chapter in your experience?
No, actually, not the mechanized infantry.
Yeah.
The second 28th. A lot of times we combat assaulted.
Okay,
into
so
areas.
that wasn't new to you.
That was
either.
not new.
Okay.
No. We did a lot of chopper work. A lot of chopper work. A lot of stuff humping from here to point A, but still a lot of chopper work.
Mhm.
Terrain-wise, it was considerably different, because when you were choppered in there, it was pretty much flat terrain
Right. Yeah.
rather than mountainous terrain.
Now
Although we saw Nui Bat In, ever heard of Nui Bat In, Black Virgin Mountain? It's
Mhm.
near the Saigon River. We could see that from our AO in the 1st, which belonged to the 25th Infantry, which was across the river from us.
This tape is.
Okay. Well, what unit did you join when you joined the 101st?
When I went to the 101st, I was assigned to Delta Company, 1st to the 506th Infantry, and I was assigned a 2nd platoon of Delta Company.
Okay. And you stated earlier that when you got to the 101st's rear, replacements were welcomed and made to feel
Yes, I
part
think
of
they're
it.
much more welcoming feeling than I got when I was down with the second of the 1st Infantry Division. I think they knew they were getting some, seasoned infantry soldiers, and they desperately needed them.
And did that carry over when you joined Delta Company?
Yes, when I joined Delta Company, I felt pretty good. The first sergeant was, of course, the first sergeant ran everything in the rear, and the company commander was out in the field whenever the company was in the field. So he dealt with the first sergeant, who was, pretty much a no nonsense kind of guy. Get your stuff geared up, and because you're going to be going out in the field in a couple days, so get your equipment all ready. But you knew by that point in time, I was already been in 6 months, so I kind of knew what was expected, what was coming, what their expectation was.
Okay, so now you joined Delta Company. Then
Yeah.
did you immediately go out on?
Immediately went out.
operations?
They flew us out into probably the first ridge line, not deep into the mountains, but out in the mountains, not in the lowlands between Camp Evans and the mountains. Flew us out there, greeted by someone from the company. Landed on an LZ and greeted from somebody from the company, and first words were, "How long you been? How many days you got in country?" And I responded, I think I said 181 days. I think the guy that asked me the question had like 90 days, and so he goes, "Oh man, you got a lot more than I have, so you've been around." So immediately want to know where you came from.
Yeah.
So that told them a lot of information when you said you'd been in the country for 6 months already as a grunt.
Now you joined the unit in the field,
Yeah.
and
We operated, seemed to me, again, they didn't always tell you what was going on, but now we're talking March, April. We did a lot of up and down, climb this mountain, climb down the mountain, down into the valley, streams and stuff, and a lot of, you weren't covering a lot of crow flies distance, but you were covering a lot of distance up and down.
A lot of
terrain,
vertical, yeah.
vertical. Just seemed to be out. We were out there for quite a while. First big occurrence for me with the 101st was in early April of 1970. We were set up on a kind of partway up a ridge line. About 1 o'clock in the morning. I was in the 2nd platoon. About 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the 3rd platoon, which was a little bit down the ridge line from us, probably a couple hundred meters in elevation lower than we were, came under attack. Satchel charges, a large number of satchel charges were thrown into their perimeter. As you know, the NVA is pretty clever soldiers. They could find what I would call dead space, and you know what the concept of dead space is you can't hit with direct fire. You can't shoot at somebody that's in dead space. So they would find dead space and they were lobbing satchel charges. So we got a call. Saddle up in the middle of the night, go down and help them out in the dark. So 2nd platoon got platoon leader got us all, and we if this had been just a diversion, we definitely would have been wiped out, because we just single filed it all the way down the side of this little hill, and by the time we got almost halfway down there, the satchel charges had stopped. So I think it was one of those hit and run things where they expended whatever they had and DD out. So where we came into, we had to come into the 3rd platoon's perimeter single file, and where we came into the perimeter between two of their positions, there was a soldier who was obviously, at the time I thought he was probably mortally wounded. He was being treated by a medic, but the majority of, he took satchel charges on his ass, on his rear end. And you could see by the configuration of the bandages that most of his butt was gone, and he was in shock. And they probably had morphine into him already at that point in time. So we got into the perimeter and helped augment their perimeter. But by then, like I said, the satchel charges had stopped, and there was no weapons fire coming from into the perimeter. And that individual I spoke of was the most severely wounded, and there was a couple other small wounds, but this guy needed immediate help. What had happened, in hindsight, what they told us was that it had been raining like hell earlier in the evening, and a lot of guys had put up ponchos to protect themselves from the rain. And then later in the evening, the storm cleared and the moon came out. It was moonlight. So they guessed that the NVA could spot the reflection of the ponchos off of the moonlight and the wetness of the ponchos. So it gave them a real clear target of where our guys were. They called in a medevac, but then the moon went away and it clouded over, and fog came in, and there was a couple guys on a makeshift stretcher, and I was on flank security, and another guy was on flank security. We left the only place appropriate was outside of the perimeter. So we left the perimeter and went through tall grass, which was, you know, up to the height of your neck. And there was a little knoll. So we made our way out to there, and then they had a strobe light. Long story short, it took over an hour and a half to get them chopper so that they could spot us and get in. And we were sitting out there in the tall grass for an hour and a half. Total darkness.
Anxious?
Very anxious. Probably one of the most scared things I ever encountered in the whole time I was there, because you just felt vulnerable that someone could just come right up behind you. You would never know until the last second.
Now, you were there with the casualties?
Yeah, with
Yeah,
the casualties.
how many troops were with you to?
There was two guys. There was two guys with a stretcher, two flank security. So it was a total of four of us, and of course one of the guys with the stretcher was doing, probably a medic, doing strobe light and stuff. So it was four of us plus the wounded soldier outside the perimeter for an hour and a half. So
Did you have any communication back to the?
We did. We had a radio.
You had a radio with
We had a
you?
radio. It was hairy.
Yeah. Now, being an infantryman with the, with the 2nd of the 28th, and then being in a mechanized infantry unit, now you're an infantryman in the 101st. Were there any differences in how you operated, or in tactics, or?
With the 2nd of the 28th, we would always set up in what I would call ambush mode. We would set up at night in a rather than a defensive mode, an ambush mode, meaning that we would set up quite often on a line with a little bit of security going the other way. And then we would always set up booby traps, our own booby traps. We would set up often just off of a trail, and that was pretty much our procedure. We didn't want to be defensive; we wanted to be in an offensive mindset. The booby traps were your warning devices, obviously.
What would you use for booby traps out there?
Claymores.
Just claymores?
Claymores, and then whatever they had with the det cord, and then we always had like a couple of stakes with tripwire that you would unroll. And there was a couple guys that were good at that.
Did you set up any automatic ambushes out there? With the.
Or the daisy chain type thing? No, usually just a couple of claymores, one down the trail, and then you'd be in the middle, in what we call a kill zone. In the 101st, it was more setting up in a defensive perimeter. I think the difference was you thought you were going to be dealing with an NVC down with the 1st, and the 101st was going to be NBA, no question about it. And they were going to bring a lot more to the party in terms of firepower, considerably more.
Okay.
So that's why we set up. The other thing we did with the 1st Infantry Division, we weren't allowed to have ponchos. We only had poncho liners. So basically, when the monsoon rains came, you got wet, you just suck it up. And the 101st allowed you to have a poncho and a poncho liner.
Why would the 1st
Do that?
not allow you to have ponchos?
I think it would improve noise discipline. If you've ever seen those ponchos, they're kind of noisy critters.
You flap in the wind.
Flap in the wind. So noise discipline was a big thing, and then also you aren't going to get any glare or reflection off a poncho liner, where you can definitely get glare and reflection off a poncho.
Okay. Was that basically the only differences that you noticed?
Pretty much, yeah. Whenever whenever you would move as a unit, you had flank security, and then you would have send people out on rifts all the way around, constantly checking what was coming up.
How about your leadership? How about quality of the NCOs and officers? But did you notice any differences between the units that you were with?
When I first got to the 101st, the very first, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway. The very first night in the field, they said, well, you're in this squad and you're going to be third watch for the night. So I said, okay, hour and a half, I don't know what it was, an hour and a half. Next morning I wake up and I hadn't been on guard at all. So I went to my squad leader and I said, what's the story? Nobody, I just want you to know nobody woke me up for my watch. He goes, oh, we put so-and-so on the first or second watch because he falls asleep and then we can sleep. I was mortified, more than mortified. I was angry and said, oh my God, I just signed my death warrant. I'm in big trouble. So I asked to speak to the platoon leader. He wouldn't speak with me, but he asked the platoon sergeant, can I speak with the platoon leader? He came back and said, no, he won't talk with you, but what's your issue? And I told him my issue was, well, that's not, yeah, we're working on that. We're working on getting that better. I said, well, you better be working on getting it better right off, because if that happens to me again, you'll wish it hadn't. So, the next night it didn't happen to me, and the night after that it didn't happen. But to me, that was the only time that maybe just by my bringing it to their attention, they said, oh, this new guy's not going to tolerate that. So I'm hoping that's what happened.
Yeah.
So, of course, you'd have people on one side of the perimeter snoring and they wouldn't wake them up. That also kind of annoyed me too. You could hear somebody snoring on the other side of the perimeter,
right,
and they didn't get woken up. So, not a good thing, but I just dealt with it the best way I thought I knew how to deal with it. And said, I just not, if this happens to me again, I didn't know what I was going to do, but it didn't happen.
So it wasn't an issue thereafter for you?
It was not an issue thereafter. So I'm hoping that I raised the awareness level by my newness.
How about the length of operations?
Longer. Out in the field a lot longer. The 1st Infantry, we would be in only out 3 to 7 days, 3 to 6 days, because there was a lot of diverse, and the ability, more flat terrain, everything, your ability to be more mobile. Whereas when you're in the mountains, it's kind of like you're out here, you got to stay out. You can't be going onto the river, or you can't be going to road sweeps and blocking and all that sort of thing. So different missions led to longer times in the field. That event that I mentioned to you in April, where the guy was wounded, well, it was our turn like 2 nights later. That's when I was wounded, actually. It was in April 10th of 1970. The next day after the guy that was wounded and medevaced, we all kind of hung out in this area. It was actually 2nd and 3rd platoon all hung out together for the whole day, and then we got mortared from the other side of the ridge line. People were pretty upset and angry. And we were at that point getting a little bit low on supplies, and we were due for a resupply. So at the end of that day, we moved out of that area. Thank goodness, because we were there all day long, and moved up the mountainside a little bit more, and cut an LZ. You know what I mean by cutting an LZ? You basically take that cord and all those explosives, and you just blow a hole in the jungle so that they can either get down enough to get your supplies to you or whatever. So we did that, and then it was late in the day, and then we stayed right around that blown out LZ. And then the next day, so there'd be 2 days later now, the company commander said, we really need to get out of here because we've been down below just a little bit, and we've been near the LZ. We got to move ourselves because we've stayed too close. So we humped about as far as we could the following day, and just before dark pulled in to an area fairly high ground, and didn't dig in or anything, just set up a defensive perimeter just before dark. And so I had second watch. I forget what time it was. 1 o'clock in the morning. It's usually a pretty good time of day. Again, the dead space, and started lobbing in satchel charges in on us, which was now two second and third platoon combined together. So we had a pretty big perimeter. Started lobbing satchel charges in on my side of the perimeter and the other side of the perimeter. Blew my claymore, started firing, doing the stuff you're supposed to do, you know. I took some light shrapnel. Satchel charges are going off all around. I got concussion in my ears. My ears were bleeding. Called in air support. It was kind of hilarious because they called in air support, and they said, well, where are you guys? We can't spot you. So we put some flares up, and they said, well, okay, well, we want a little bit more definition of your perimeter. So they had us light C4 and throw it out. Throw it out in front of us.
Okay.
So,
well, there goes your night vision.
I don't think they're going to see, yeah, there goes your night vision. Plus, I don't think they're going to see a piece of burning C4 up, air support. And so they brought in the air support, they brought in their artillery, they brought in the whole deal. And we started getting scared whether we're going to be victims of friendly fire at that point. So the next day, which would be April 10th, they went around the perimeter and assessed the wounded, and there was nobody that was mortally wounded, but there were a number of people that were wounded. So enough people were wounded that they decided, well, rather than just calling in medevacs, we're gonna extract the company. So they extracted us from the field and brought us into Camp Evans, and sent us to the medical facilities at Camp Evans and treated us there, and sort of regrouped the company, because that was one of those. So now they've been hit, twice in 2 days. So they figured, well, we'll bring them back in. They brought us back in and kind of regrouped us, and then they sent us to a fire base called Rakkasan.
Did you have some convalescent period from your wounds, or your
Mine were so minor.
Okay.
Mine were really very minor.
Okay.
Very minor. I mean, there were no stitches or anything like that. Just very minor wounds. As a matter of fact, I was surprised that they gave me a Purple Heart. I didn't find that out till later on.
So you went to a fire base.
Went to fire base. I don't know if I told you I was pretty lucky. think I've used up all my luck there.
Yeah.
A couple weeks into, now we're in late April. We're on Firebase. We're building up the Firebase. We're cleaning it up. We're doing all the things that you do on a Firebase. I had been operated on twice already while I was in Vietnam. At this point in time, I had in December I had been I had my body chemistry did not mesh well with a jungle environment.
Okay.
The dirt, the sweat, the whatever that goes with that whole deal. I had my armpit cut open twice. First time they put 10 yards of gauze in the hole, a massive hole in my armpit, abscess cyst. And actually was in the hospital in convalescence from that. And then later when I was with the second, the same armpit started acting up again. And I convinced them in the aid station to lance it and put a wick in it and allow it to heal that way.
Just let it drain naturally.
Let it drain. Yeah, the thing with the first time was such a big hole and it was such a big pocket of infection that they had to lance it and, like I said, put this 10 yards of gauze, and then it had to heal from the inside out. So I was actually in the hospital for probably 10 days from that. On the Firebase, Rakkasan, late April, I got an infection in my hand. I have a scar there. That's my lifesaver. Cellulitis. I got cellulitis in my hand. So I went to the aid station on Firebase and they said, "Oh, we'll give you some penicillin pills." I said, "Look, it's not going to work. I need a shot. I need shots of penicillin. I need the real heavy duty stuff." And of course they wouldn't listen to me. They're the medical. You're the grunt. You're the grunt.
Right. You don't know what you're talking about.
So a couple days and no response. So they sent me back to Camp Evans. Back to Camp Evans, hand's getting worse. Starting to get a streak going up my arm. So what's the first sergeant do? Sends me out on bunker guard. By now I can't even pick up a weapon and hold it in my hand. He sends me out bunker guard duty. So essentially I got pissed off. I said, "All right, Dick, you've been this route before and nobody's helped you, so you got to help yourself." So I went to the medic and I said, "Can you give me some pain pills?" Yep. So I threw away the penicillin pills and started taking pain pills. And within a day and a half, my hand blew up so bad they had to medevac me back to Fubai, operate on it, go to the hospital there. Then they sent me to not Cameron, maybe it was Cameron, where there was it was an Air Force hospital,
Big hospital.
convalesce, yep, and then went from an Air Force hospital to an Army hospital. Long story short, that I was out of operation for like 26 days for that. During that time, my second platoon on May 7th, you'll be hearing from one of the guys in the morning, was engaged in a ferocious battle with the NVA back in our AO, because they had now gone from the Firebase back out into the field. 7 were killed. Out of 18 guys, 7 were killed and a dozen were wounded. There's actually a book written about it, which I'm a character in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
It's called Troubled Hero. The medic from our company received the Medal of Honor from this battle that I'm describing that happened to the 2nd Platoon on May 7th. Another guy received a Distinguished Service Cross. We will be interviewing tomorrow. Silver Star, 15 Bronze Stars,
Wow.
18 Purple Hearts. It was like them against a sapper unit. And if it hadn't been for air support, they all would have been wiped. So my luck. That's my platoon. That's my platoon. That's, you know, my guys. So when I come back from the hospital,
Did
guess who?
they give you a medical profile at the hospital, or just
No.
return you to full
Just
duty?
returned me to full duty. So I come back from the hospital, guess what? Dick's lost all his buddies again for the third time. For the third time. Yeah. All the guys he knew, all the guys are gone. Almost, with the exception of a couple.
Mhm.
So I just went further and further into my shell of, you can't trust anybody, you just gotta, it's you against everybody else. Came back in late May, went back in the field, but to me it's a blur from the time I came back in sometime in May to the time July rolled around. I went on an R&R in Bangkok, but I was in the field, and if you asked me names of the guys and stuff, I couldn't tell you, because I'm just blank. I'm blank, totally blank on all that. Who they were, I can remember interacting with them, but I was just so far into my personal
Right.
shell that I could trust nobody, including the guy next to me. Which, you know how horrible a feeling that is when you can't trust you feel you can't trust the guy next to you, whatever your guy is. You can only trust yourself in a war zone. It's not a very good feeling, I can tell you that.
So how long did you have in country when you took your R&R?
I went in June, so and I came October 1st, so October,
Okay.
November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June.
About
Yeah.
9 months.
About 9 months.
8 or 9 months,
So the next significant event that occurred for me personally was the day I came back from my R&R, which would be late June or the first couple days of July. Company commander brings me in to, they're on a fire base now called Catherine. Company's on a fire base. So I flew from Camp Evans back out to the fire base to go back in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the guy that's the resupply guy for the company is derosing. Do you want his job? I said, sure do. So I became the liaison between the supply sergeant and all this stuff as of that. So that guy worked with me a couple days and said, and then he went into
So
back in
whatever
there.
the field needed that the supply sergeant got, then you
Yep.
made sure it got on a logboard or whatever
Yep.
to get out.
Yeah, and I got on the bird.
Oh, with
and,
it,
oh
okay.
well, yeah,
You take it out.
I loaded it and yeah.
Okay.
brought it out. So that became my new job, and I became a REMP at about the 9+ month mark. Because as another person you interviewed said, there was this massive turnover in the company, and
Mhm.
by now I was one of the longer term guys.
Yeah.
In terms
Although
of
we
total-
only there for in country longer, but
Yeah.
only with them for
For-
4 or 5 months. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So based on that, I missed the entire Ripcord experience. I was actually on a fire base called, it's either Birmingham or I forget the other one, Bastogne.
Okay.
I was actually sitting the day, I think it was July 20th, when Ripcord broke out. I was sitting on the tarmac with the full array of resupply, sodas, food, ammo, everything that you want for Delta Company. When Ripcord went down, it never got to them.
No.
So I just sat there for the whole day, and then actually I went back into the hooch where they had the commo, And I listened to radio traffic all day long of helicopters trying to go in and extract them whole. I
Just
could
trying to follow it over.
follow it over the air, and you know, helicopters being shot off the LZ and rolling down the side of the hillside.
How did you feel about that?
It was horrible. I felt like I was letting my guys down.
Like almost survivor's guilt. Huh?
Survivor's guilt, big time, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just knew that a lot of people were dying, and you know, nothing I could do about it personally, but it was horrible. But again, there's that survivor part of your brain that says, I'm glad I'm where I am.
Yeah, better than me, right? Yeah.
Better than me, yeah.
So you then basically finished your
My tour as
doing this
resupply
liaison.
Yep.
And
yeah.
did you move much in that job, or did you basically stay on Bastogne or one of the?
No, I moved a
fire
lot.
bases?
I moved
Okay.
a lot, yeah.
Depending on where the company was.
Depending upon
operating?
where the company was operating, yeah.
Okay.
And then, yeah,
Do you think the guys in the field got as much stuff as they needed?
they tried when we could get it available. Like the biggest thing that I loved to have was cold sodas and stuff like that. And then Ranger, who was the company commander until his demise, always put in an order for it. Get us sodas and put ice in the duffel bags, and so that we could try to get sodas out to the guys. 'Cause cold drink was like priceless in the field, absolutely priceless. Yeah, that was another whole experience, but then you felt like you felt like an outsider once that transition. But everybody wanted a REMF job, and I was just lucky enough to get one.
Yeah.
And I think probably maybe you looked at my record that by then I was almost 25 years old, and I had a college degree. And
One wound and 3 other surgeries.
Yeah.
In a
So-
9-month period or
Yeah.
whatever.
So, but I was very lucky. That's why I was in the right place at the right time.
Just happened, yeah. So you finished your tour there, and then you rotated back to the States.
Yeah, and I went to Fort Carson, Colorado.
Okay, you went, did you go ship out through Cameron or Da Nang, or can you remember?
I think I came out of Cameron Bay. I know I didn't go. I know it was Cameron Bay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Went to
And
Fort Lewis?
Fort Carson, Colorado. Well, Fort Lewis. I flew home to
Yeah,
Fort
right,
Lewis, correct,
right.
and then they did the stake in the Class A uniform and
Yeah.
sent you on your way.
Your steak dinner, and
Yeah. And then I got home and.
Now, how much time did you have left in the Army when you got home?
So I left Vietnam October 1st of 1970, and I had to go until May.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had leave and then reported.
Just about missed the 6-month drop.
Just
then,
about missed the 6 months.
right? Didn't have any luck there, did you?
No. And went to a mechanized infantry unit. The rest at Fort Carson, it was It was the 5th mech, and then it became the 4th infantry
Right.
during my 6 months there. But did pretty good. I got I was first in my board. That's how I made sergeant. And I was
Did make E5
soldier.
at,
I made
at Fort Carson?
yeah, I did. Yeah. Had won a bunch of awards and stuff because.
Wasn't that kind of unusual for a Vietnam returnee who has 7 months left to be, soldier of the month?
Well, it's funny because what happened was I was a Spec 4. I was an anonymous Spec 4, and they had a class. It was a post-wide class. It was called a TAMS. It was a TAMS clerk. It was actually someone that did the paperwork for the motor pool.
Okay.
So it was a 2-week class. So The guy that was supposed to go couldn't go, so they said, "Oh, this guy looks like he's pretty smart, so let's send him." So I was an honor graduate of the class, and I was there with officers and
Oh, wow, okay.
senior NCOs and everything. So I said,
Made you
"Yeah."
feel good.
Made you feel good. So they said, "Well, let's go on a roll. Let's put him up for not NCO, but the listed guy of the quarter," and I won that competition. And then they put me up for the battalion competition. I won that. And they put me up something another one. I won that one. So this guy's doing pretty good. Let's send him to the promotion board. So I sent me to the promotion board, and they came out first on the promotion board.
Great.
And they said, "Well, you gonna make Army your career?" I said, "Not even. Not gonna happen. We need good NCOs like you," and stuff.
I just want to go back to Vietnam just for a minute. Now,
Sure.
you were with the a couple of units in the first ID, and you were at the 101st, and then
Yeah.
you also had somewhat of a rear area job.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like you were the lifeguard at Cameron Bay, but
Yeah.
you were in the rear.
Yeah.
How about drug use?
Oh, okay.
What-
Drug use was for the guys in the rear, not talking about the guys in the field. The guys very rampant. Drug use was a big issue. Race was a big issue, significant issue. Matter of fact, while I was in the rear, one black guy killed another black guy in one of the company hooches arguing over a boombox. Shot him with a .45.
That was black on black violence.
Yeah,
right?
black on black violence. But there was a lot of, they had their own hooch. And
A lot of self-segregation.
Yep,
and-
self-segregation, black power, there were the black armbands. You were white honkies, and it was, in the rear it was pretty bad. In the field that did not happen. People were treated the same and equal, but that whole experience in the rear was quite clear.
Now the rear, Camp Evans.
Company area,
and
my
even just the that
company area, my
company area.
company area. Guys actually had about 10 days left before I was going to leave. Guys throwing frags and near the first sergeant's hooch to intimidate him.
Now, were these guys that were they grunts out of the field and rear area jobs, or were they like the
Shammers, a lot of shammers. Those
Okay.
guys that should have been in the field, but they had profiles, or they were working on profiles,
Okay.
or they just
So
said
they were still 11 Bravo guys.
they were still
but
11
there
Bravo
was
guys. They weren't.
something else.
They weren't.
Okay.
They weren't. They weren't recruiting, or they weren't
But so two
supply
worlds,
sergeant or
the rear and the field.
absolutely
Yeah.
two different worlds. Two different worlds.
How was it at the
Wrong.
first with the first ID when you were there? Did
That
you
was
notice
not
any-
that's what shocked me when I got up to the 101st. I don't know if
Okay.
there was just that 6-month difference in the culture and back here in the country that changed things. But no, with the First Infantry, all the blacks and whites all got along together. Consider totally different environment. I don't know why, but it just was.
Yeah, coming back now, you said you don't want to be in the Army anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did you do?
Well, the day I got out of the Army, I had to wear my dress uniform because I wanted to get the cheap flight home. So I put my Class A uniform on, got in the plane. As soon as the plane took off, I went into the men's room and changed out in my uniform. I had some civilian clothes, and I said, "There, that's the last time I'll ever put a uniform on again. Never going to happen again." So 4 years later, I had 2 years drafted, but then you had the 4 years in the inactive reserve. So actually 2 years and 2 months later, my 6-year hitch was up by like about 6 weeks, and a guy came and recruited me. He said, "How'd you like to come to a military police company, and you can be a correctional counselor?" Because at the time my job was helping veterans get jobs and job training and all that sort of thing, and I had a lot of experience with that. So I said, "Sure, if you'll make me a staff sergeant, I'll join up." He goes, well, we can put in a grade determination for you and with your degree and your work experience. So it was a correctional facility unit. MPs, they were called. I forget what the nomenclature was now. They were
An active duty unit?
no, Army Reserve unit.
Oh,
Near
reserve
my
unit.
hometown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A year and a half later, they disbanded the unit and made them combat MPs. So I went from a correctional counselor to a squad leader, a combat MP squad leader in short order. But what happened was that then my infantry experience really came into play because they ran patrols and they set up prisoner of war camps and with defensive fighting positions and all that sort of stuff. So all of a sudden that was a big asset.
So you were the resident expert.
Resident expert in infantry tactics. And so I belonged to this MP company for 10 years. And then I kind of got a little burned out, so I went into this individual mobilization augmentee program and did tours at 5 years at Fort Hood, Fort McClellan, Fort Bliss, Texas, and then Fort Sam Houston and Fort Bliss. And then my last 6 years I did at Fort McPherson, Georgia.
As an MP?
Yeah.
In the MPs?
In the MPs. And in June of 1993, I made Sergeant Major. And then I was assigned to Sergeant Major jobs. And I was assigned to Fort McPherson, Georgia, and 9/11. I was scheduled to go there in September of 2001 for 2 weeks. And when I got there, my boss, who was a lieutenant colonel, part of that, I was assigned to Forces Command Headquarters, and they had a MP command within the Forces Command, all these specialty jobs. So I just said to my boss, I said, I want to volunteer for active duty. He said, oh, we could really use you because we've just gone from coverage in the command and control center from 12 hours a day to 24 hours a day. So we need somebody another 12 hours a day. So I volunteered and I went down there for 4.5 months in the bowels of the basement and helped plan the invasion of Afghanistan.
Wow.
And felt good about that, and helped. It was involved in the planning of setting up and launching Gitmo, and by then that was May. It's funny. My last day of active duty was May of 2002. I think it was May 7th of 2002, and my last day of active duty on the Army was May 6th of 1971. So I was in the Army in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and aughts, so part of 5 decades I was in the Army.
For somebody who
Didn't want to do
the
it.
Army.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Dick, for sharing your story with us. It's just a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.